Hello, everyone. We're super pumped to be back with one more Passion Project Genius Hour webinar extravaganza before the schools go on break here this winter. And that's only relevant if you're watching this right now, not like a year and a half from now in June, but that's okay. But I'm super excited to have our dear, dear friend and colleague and former team member, original like group or member of the band, Erin Olson, who is now an instructional leader at Sioux Central up in Northwest Iowa. But before that, and before being part of our Prairie Lakes team, she was in the classroom as an English language arts teacher. And so she's going to share some of her experiences with her high school kids and how she helped them explore their passions and make a difference. And with that, I'm going to stop my awkward introduction and turn it over to Erin.
Thank you, Leslie. I'm going to take a moment and share my screen. I have lots of things on my screen. Here we go. So as Leslie mentioned, I taught high school English. There we go. Back to the beginning. So I taught high school English, and I want to share with you a class I designed that is rooted in the idea of read, be inspired, and act. So I think about experiences. I think about my own experiences. 20 years ago, I think about what I knew and what I know now and my experiences from the start of school. We are some of our experiences. The learning that we get happens through all that we encounter. The same is true of our students. So 20 years ago, what I knew then is because of the experiences that my teachers designed, of the experiences that my parents would have helped develop or helped me have. The same is true, like I said, for our students. So it's really important that we consider the learning that we design for kids. What do we want kids to experience? You're going to hear me say that word often. I was given the task to redesign a novels course, a traditional novels course. And I thought about my experiences as a reader. I thought about my own children, my understanding of their relationship with reading, past, present, and future. I thought about the reality of myself as an adult reader. And I thought about what did I want students to gain as a result of being in this class? And so I contemplated, thought about books. And Leslie and Julie, feel free to chime in. Can you think of something that you've read that has moved you to an emotion, moved you to anger, moved you to sorrow, that comforted you? Do you have something that you've read that tugged at your heart, that made you think like you hadn't thought before? Can you think of something that you've read?
I'm pregnant, so everything makes me cry. But small great things.
So at this time, like when I was tasked with redesigning this class, I was reading the last lecture. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but you know, it's true story. Professor who is dying writes his last lecture, essentially. And I have to tell you, it did something to me. Like the words spoke to me, and I was comforted and I was hurt. And then when he did pass away, I mourned him as if I were his friend. And I think that's important to share, because the way life works and the way reading works, that sometimes those things come into alignment, and they call our attention to action. It is with emotion that moves us. And so I thought about that book, and I remember when I learned that he had passed away, I called a teacher friend who was also reading that book, and we talked about it. We wanted to talk about what we were reading, because that's what adults do, right? We talk about what we read. Think about this. In any time in your adult life reading, have you rushed to go create a diorama of a scene that took place in a book? Or did you hurry up to answer the study guide questions? Or did you stop reading at a really good part because, it was the end of chapter 3? No, like that is not how we read. And so I really wanted, again, to think about, what did I want for kids? Well, I wanted them to know and feel what freedom within reading is, what it's like to read when you get to read just to read. And so this was born: read, be inspired, and act. And so the idea was that students would have choice. Their reading would inspire some kind of service. And I knew for this to happen, I had to play matchmaker. I'm a hard to please reader. And so I empathize with students that are as well. And so I thought about giving choice with some limits. So I gave lists of books you must read before you graduate, lists from bestseller book lists, also books that have changed the world, books about unsung heroes. Students were encouraged to read fiction, nonfiction. And when I first designed this, I did it within 1 quarter. So it was a semester class, but I wasn't sure how it was going to work. So this was a task that we were taking on for 1 quarter, the first quarter of the semester course. My class design, it was set up, I know we talk about Genius Hour, like kids have 20% time to work on their passions. I want you to flip that around. I had 20% time to teach, and it was 80% time students were blogging, reading, or conferencing with me. So on Monday, or the first day of the week, I taught a lesson. We had whole group practice. During that lesson, I modeled some kind of literary critique or lens, some kind of filter to help students examine text. And then they had practice in small group, and eventually it was independent application during Tuesday through Friday, where students were either reading, conferencing with me, or blogging their application of that taught strategy. I intentionally chose the lenses and critiques to help students become emotionally available during the reading process. That was all intentional, because I knew that it is with emotion that we act. When we're sad, we know when someone's sad, we want to bring comfort. When we see an injustice, when we're angered by something, we want to right that wrong. When we're happy, we want to rejoice. So I see emotion as a spur of action, and I wanted to make sure that those critiques and lenses I was teaching would help accomplish that task. So this was the design. Now, I remember the phase, and you ladies probably do too, where like, oh, we're going to have a blog because we can, or oh, we're going to just put our kids' work online. And I again was intentional with this, because I think there's millions of blogs that probably exist and are no longer in use, or did not have a reader, that didn't have a reader base. And I wanted to help my students have that authentic audience, and to have an audience in 2 parts: an audience that gave them feedback on their writing and their blogging just as a creator, but also an audience that was interested in what they were sharing about their reading. And so I worked really hard to gather people from my professional learning network via Twitter to help be a support for my students. And so that was part of the blogging, that students were able to get feedback, and then I was able to teach them how to respond to feedback. So with their reflections and with what they were doing, students became connected to their text. We read the news, we read Plato, we read Hughes, we were inspired by Kipling. I connected them from everything from Kid President to Sarah McLachlan to metal singers, you name it. All text was available to students that we were practicing these strategies with, so they could do exactly what they needed to do, and that was be inspired by their reading, so they could think of their contribution and then act. When we think about the contribution, I'm asked often to, how did you grade? How would I grade this? Same with the blogs, like how do you go about that? Because that seems like a lot to manage. And so with the contribution, I wasn't grading service. I think that's really important. I didn't teach service either. I graded what I taught. I taught students how to make textual connections. I taught students how to use evidence of text and how to cite and how to frame and explain. I taught students about reflection and how to capture process. So I graded what I taught. I didn't grade the contribution. So when students shared their service, these were the requirements. They had to say, it was when I read this, insert textual citation, that inspired me to do this. In my life, this was happening, and that is why I connected, and blah, 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 blah. This is what I did. So that's what they shared with us as a class. I asked them to capture the process, not because I didn't believe that they weren't going to do it, because there is something valuable about seeing how something came to be. And there's inspiration to be gained from even that process. When you see how someone built a house, it's fascinating. It's inspiring, like how someone came upon their plan, when something that was nothing came to be something. There's a story there. And I wanted them to share the story, to share the journey, and of course reflect. So the purpose was not only were they doing something they were inspired to do, but their action would also be inspiring to inspire others. And so it continues. I didn't grade their contribution. There's no way I could have.
I really appreciate you saying that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just think that's such a huge piece.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. And I think that's where people get hung up, like how on the assessment piece. But I can't stress enough, like you grade what you're teaching, the skills I was teaching, the active contribution, that service, that's just reality. Like we should just be inspired by what we learn and what we do and just do good stuff because we can and we're able. So when I think about everything I'm proud about, I can tell you 100% of my students did this, 100%. And that's amazing. I can't tell you that happened on every project or every assignment I assigned as a teacher, because I can't tell you that because I'd be lying. But 100% of my students did read, were inspired, and did some sort of action. And that is powerful. And I think of even what I taught, the literary critiques, the lenses. I mean, some of that stuff is what English majors dread. And I didn't teach it because for the sake of the critique or the lens. I taught it for students to have a gained perspective, a new lens on text, a new idea, to see it from somewhere else. I mean, I think about even books I've read, and I don't know if you ladies have read a book twice. Have you ever had this experience of you've read the same book twice? The second time you read that book, it's a different experience. It's a different experience because you have different experiences. And I thought of that when approaching the critique and lens. Students can use those lenses and critiques to bring a different experience to the text. And I had to have, again, their emotion triggered to help them see and be inspired to do some kind of service. And so they did. They read, they were inspired, and they acted. I would like you to listen to a story about Katie. She's a former student of mine. And since it's, it was a while ago that I was teaching, her stories kind of come full circle. She was a junior in my class, but you see her here. This is from Katie's graduation from the Air Force Academy in 2018. She graduated with a bachelor's degree in science of aeronautical engineering, and she was awarded top flight commander among her class of 986. The sum of many experiences led Katie to where she is. Again, where are some of our experiences? See, first, Katie had a trip to the Air Force Base in middle school that started her desire to fly. In high school, she attended a summer camp there, and that fueled the fire. And then in a high school midterm class, she experienced an internship with a pilot. Katie was a student in my class as a junior, like I said. She read a lot of books, but the one that really hit her heart was Kite Runner. she was inspired, and she wanted to help children. That was something about, her interaction with that book. There was just, she was really troubled, and she wanted to help children either in war-torn countries, cities, orphanages. It was just tugging at her heart. And it just so happened at the same time, I invited a community panel to come to my class to talk about service and different opportunities that students could have to make a contribution. And so during that time, she connected with one of the speakers, Barb Wilkerson, and the local nonprofit group Love Takes Root, founded by Dr. Wilkerson. The organization helps children around the world who are facing dire circumstances. So Katie Red had an experience connected to her world, her life, what was happening, and her passion then ensued. So Katie connected with the Wilkersons and Love Takes Root, and she raised money and sent supplies to an orphanage in Haiti. She's a junior in high school when this is happening. She had a Jean Day for us at school. That's how she raised money. And that's a big deal, I tell you what. So she figured out how to send things, how to send to Haiti, the packaging, all of it. So she figured that out. She sent supplies to Haiti. So that was her junior year. Her senior year, she went to Haiti with her mom and the group, and she helped the orphanage relocate to a sustainable farm. That senior year, she was accepted into the Air Force Academy, and I had no doubt that she wouldn't be. She was a very determined young woman, and she still is. Still, her senior year, she started a scholarship for students at the orphanage. She's a senior, starting a scholarship for others so they can continue their education. She read, she was inspired. Fast forward for Katie here to her officer graduation. When Katie was to take the officer oath at graduation, another current or former officer must give the officer oath. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but that's how that works. Katie invited Dr. Wilkerson, a West Point graduate, to do just that, and he did. Isn't that something? You think about the connections, and I was teaching in a K-12 building. Class size anywhere between 50 to 70 per grade level. Very rural. And the connections that she made through her service. And Dr. Wilkerson came from Iowa, flew to her graduation, and gave the officer oath. Someone she first met through her work with Love Takes Root.
And what a testament to you, Erin, for making this happen, because this can't just happen by chance. You were very intentional in helping kids think through this and be inspired and wanting to do something good for others. So it just goes to show how important it is to have teachers like you in children's lives, because her life, her path, it totally changed because of a teacher like you that she had.
Well, I can't take credit for any of that. She's amazing herself, and she was determined, like I said. But I think when I think about Katie, and I think about many of our students, how about we don't get in the way? Just how about that? Katie was going to be successful with me or without me. I truly believe that. She was made to move mountains. But we don't need to stand in our kids' ways. We think about their passion, and why can't we tap into that and connect it to our content? And that's exactly what happened. The stars aligned, and that I promise that every time a teacher opens themselves up and allows to design an experience that kids can see the world, feel the world, and contribute to the world, exactly what was supposed to happen is going to happen. And that sounds, a bit philosophical, but the book, the organization, her desire for the Air Force, like the alignment of that, like amazing, right? But I have so many students that the same thing happened, that what was happening in their own world, whether their interest or concerns, or no matter what it was, it just so happened that book and life and their hobbies and talents made for an awesome connection for a contribution. Every time. So, like I said, Katie came to me wanting to change the world. So I fueled her fire. I provided opportunity. I designed an experience. She read, she was inspired. And that is why I really want everybody to think about experiences matter. What we design matters. It mattered for Casey, one of my students, who proudly announced the first book he read happened to be in my class, the novels class. And I taught 2 other English classes prior. But he did admit that he did finish reading a book in novels. And he'd read, among the things he read The Acorn People. It's a short story. And in that story, there is a nature connection, and there's the acorn is a symbol of camaraderie, overcoming something difficult. So I'll tell you that much about the short story. Well, Casey, considering his connection to the text and then his life, because I asked students to consider, like, what's happening in your world? How can you marry the two? He decided to make a birdhouse. That was his nature connection. And then he gave that to our high school principal. And he told him, because of you, I'm graduating. I mean, wow, right? I mean, I still get teary-eyed because I still picture this young man in the office waiting anxiously to give our principal the birdhouse. That's a contribution. And how do you grade that? I mean, people, how do you grade projects? You hear that's such a concern. How do I grade the birdhouse? How do I grade that against going to Haiti? Or how do I grade that against to time volunteered in a nursing home, or to a presentation given at Sunday school? It's more like I don't. Why would you? Would be a better question. Why would you grade that? It mattered to Savannah, who read Impulse. And that book addresses self-perception and beauty and self-harm. And she really wanted to raise awareness about something that people really weren't talking about. And mind you, it's hardly talked about now, but then it really wasn't talked about. It wasn't, after all, it's not polite dinner conversation to talk about kids who are hurting themselves. And so she really thought, we got to get people talking about this. And she spread awareness, and she covered the mirrors in our school with positive messages to young women. And she worked with the Butterfly Project, and she's writing about this, and I'm retweeting, and she's tweeting her blog. Angela Myers actually asked her to be a guest blogger, and Savannah wrote about her work. And Savannah had tens of thousands of hits, is that the right word? Readers on that blog, people who had visited that page and saw what she had written. That's an audience I could have never provided for her, like me, myself. To this day, Savannah works in a field where she's able to help people. The stories of what kids did are endless. And I know that it impacted them because of how much it impacted me. Like, how could it not? I mean, years later, I'm talking about this, and I still feel in my heart so much joy, and enough to almost have tears in my eyes thinking about how proud of them I was for what they did when they did it. And then the effect of the work that they did was immeasurable. So this doesn't have to be isolated to English class. Content concept plus the world, what's happening in the world, one's talents, one's passions, combine the two to do something amazing. That can be applied anywhere. And anytime I think about projects or quests or challenges, and even technology, I do throw it through this framework. We want it to enhance and inspire. So as I even thought about and reflected on read, be inspired, act, I want to enhance the learning experience, and I want students to feel inspired and be able to inspire. I want it connected to concept and rooted in standards. And I made sure of that with my class when I was teaching those lenses and critiques. I exposed students to grade level material. And I helped them think about that with critique and with lenses. But students also had choice in what they were reading, so they were able to apply that. We want to make this matter. Whatever we do, we want to make it matter. And I mean make it matter to something more than our grade book, something more than just to me. We want students' work to matter. And of course, we should be there to support. That is a role we should play. And we should utilize our connections to share students awesome, because they're worth it. So when it comes down to it, we do make a difference. That's what we are. We're difference makers. And that can happen in a lot of ways. It happens in our daily interactions. But I think it's overlooked in another way it can happen, and that is through the experiences we design. We are able to combat the experience deficit that students have by providing experiences that are meaningful, by letting students feel the reach of their voice, the power of their contribution. And just imagine if students had that satisfaction, if they had that confidence to know that what they do does matter, what they do can make a difference. I mean, that is changing the trajectory of a student's life when they can have that realization. And started with a class. I'm thankful I was tasked with the challenge to change it up. And so I did. Thanks, ladies.
I want to clap.
You want to clap?
I did, but I felt like my one person clapping would not give you quite the effect that we were going for here.
It's very emotional.
And
Right?
you can hear, right? Like how proud you still are of your kids.
Well,
and I'm sure that while you're sharing about your students, how many times probably have they talked about what you allowed them to do, you know, as their teacher? Like, you know, those things I'm sure still are stuck with them.
You know, I mean, I hope so. I have fond memories of that. I'm so proud of them. And, you know, this one story I didn't share that I really do want to share, because it's amazing how things come full circle. So Carissa, when she was reading, I wish I could remember her book, but I can't off the top of my head. But when she was reading a book, and she was inspired then to help, and maybe it was the last lecture, but anyway, she was inspired to help people who are suffering. So right as this happens, Carissa's nephew was delivered early and was in the NICU. So Carissa then, you know, she noticed there was a fireman came and volunteered and held babies in the NICU. And this isn't the Sanford Children's Hospital in Sioux Falls. So, okay, so she's having this experience. So she's, you know, visiting her nephew, and she's reading this book, and she decides that she wants to make tie blankets and donate to the NICU. And she wrote a letter explaining like her nephew, and because I don't know if you've ever been in NICU, but I mean, that's, you know, parents can be there for a short time or a very, very long time. It's an amazing, but hard, you know, place to be. And so she donated, she made blankets, and it was like a quilting circle, by the way. So in the hallway, there are all these girls helping do tie blankets, and she donated. Okay, so this is where full circle for me. You fast forward like 5-6 years, and I'm in Children's Hospital. Sorry. If we get a blanket.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't mean to cry, but
the benefit. I mean, you said
work was continued.
yeah.
We were the receiver. I mean, really. And it makes me cry because I think, why can't school be more of that? I mean, and I would have never known that I'm in that position. And also, I have to say, I did not know how important her act was until we were on the receiving end. Like, I thought it was awesome then, but did I realize how special that really was. And so, you know, I have tears in my eyes, but this is it. This is what it comes down to. My grandma told me, when someone passes away, you make a casserole and you bring toilet paper and toiletries over to their house, right? You do that. When someone's sick, you bring chicken noodle soup. When someone does something nice, you write a thank you. We can incorporate that spirit into what we do at school. And imagine if we all did, what a better place, what a better neighborhood community we would all have if that was the spirit.
Absolutely.
If the purpose of learning, right, was just to be better and to do better.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So true.
But thank you very much for letting me share. Feel free to reach out if you would like to learn more about Read, Be Inspired, Act, or would like my support. You can reach me via Twitter, or you can email at eolson@siouxcentral.org.
Thank you so much, Erin, for sharing your students' inspiring stories and also your process with us. We really appreciate you taking the time, and we appreciate you offering to follow up with people who might be interested. So have a great afternoon.
You too.